So we're going to move on here now to our second topic, our second article, this coming from Reuters. We have Republicans unveil $568 billion infrastructure package to counter Biden's $2.3 trillion plan. Washington, April 22nd. U.S. Senate Republicans on Thursday proposed a $568 billion five-year infrastructure package as a counteroffer to President Joe Biden's sweeping $2.3 trillion plan, calling their measure a starting point for bipartisan negotiations. The proposal, which falls below an initial Republican target range of $600 to $800 billion, focuses narrowly on traditional infrastructure projects, including roads, bridges, rail, ports, water systems, and on broadband access. It would not result in higher taxes, but be fully paid through user fees and unspent federal funds. So as far as thoughts there, do you have any thoughts so far?
Well, I feel like I think as a counter offer, this is a little better. Like my issue with President Biden's plan is he's saying everything under the sun's infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel this really does more so target infrastructure.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very specifically targeting infrastructure.
Like, I think, and we definitely, living where we live, we know we definitely need the infrastructure. Like, I don't want money going to foreign countries anymore. I want them going onto my city streets. But I like it so far.
Yeah, so my only point that I'd make is I'd say it's great that they're coming up with a counter proposal instead of just declining everything that comes their way,
which is usually what they do.
Right. So that's good. I'm happy about that. That being said, I would love to. I mean, this is the left-wing person in me, left-wing big centralized government person, not synonymous. I'm just both of those. I would love to see them raise taxes to pay for a little bit more. But narrowing the focus on the bill is fine, right?
Yeah, I agree. And you know what? I read a little bit ahead and I saw Schumer bringing up the green jobs and everything. And I agree, we definitely need green jobs. But right now in this country, we need to go about it in a very careful way. Because they overnight cut our energy dependency off, and we need to be able to slowly work towards that. This is the issue in this country from everything, like the revolution, the Civil War. We do everything in this country like ripping off a Band-Aid. We need to be careful on how we do it.
So the article continues. Where was I? Oh, there we are. This is the largest infrastructure investment plan that Republicans have come forward with, said Senator Shelley Moore Capito, who has helped lead the effort as top Republican on the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. We see this as an offer that's on the table and deserves a response, she told a press conference, while flanked by leading Republican members of other Senate committees with jurisdiction over infrastructure. Republicans sent the proposal to the White House on Thursday before it was unveiled, but the package, which represents less than 1/4 of Biden's package, has already been dismissed by Democrats in Congress as inadequate. Biden, who this week asked Republicans to offer a counterproposal by mid-May, proposed a sweeping infrastructure plan that not only includes traditional infrastructure projects, but also addresses climate change and expands human services such as elder care. Republicans have opposed the size and scope of Biden's proposal, as well as its plan to pay for some spending by raising taxes on U.S. corporations. Thursday's proposal could form the basis of a two-track infrastructure process that would include a smaller bipartisan bill and a larger measure that Democrats could move through Congress without Republican votes. So the article ends there, and this is the main point that I wanted to bring up with this article, is that partisan politics is ridiculous.
It's dividing us worse.
Everyone agrees that there needs to be some sort of infrastructure overhaul in the United States. But because of partisan politics, nothing has gotten we're in this back and forth oh, I'm gonna include more than I know. Like, Biden is
Yeah.
including things in his bill that he knows Republicans aren't going to accept. And the Republicans are lowballing, throwing, like, a smaller amount of revenue towards their plan that they know Biden's not going to accept. And,
Well,
like,
and this
at the end of the day, this just slows down and like, the American people who need to use this infrastructure are the ones suffering for this back and forth. Everyone agrees there should be some sort of infrastructure. Like, why can't we just start with, hey, this is the problem, this is how much money it's going to cost to fix, let's find a way to do it?
Yeah, I agree. And, this goes back to the thing we were just saying before you finished. Like, everyone's for saving the environment. Everyone's for doing these things. Everyone's for green jobs. But you're going too fast. They cannot continue doing this partisanship, this bipartisanship. Because they need to be bipartisan. They can't be partisan. Biden came in and said, oh, we're going to unite. We're going to unite. Everything they have passed through the House has been on party lines. Everything. And I look at someone like Joe Manchin, which, what? God bless him. God bless him. The man says, I'm going to sit and try to make a deal. Because he's the deciding vote. And he knows it, so he's like, we're going to work together. This is ridiculous. We can't keep dividing. And this has been going on since Bush's last year in office. And it hasn't stopped. It's just like, this is what brings countries down. It's just this bickering between one another. If you really think about like the French Revolution, the left, that's literally where the phrase left and right came from, because you had the Jacobins on the left side and you had the conservatives on the right, and the Jacobins and conservatives hated each other. And then what happened? The Jacobins just killed off all the conservatives. Like, we really need to understand, and that's why I actually like the English system, the German system, the system the Russians act like they have, of parliamentarianism. Don't hurt me, Daddy Putin. But, that's it. Like, someone the other day I heard say, oh, Parliament's horrible because there's 800 different parties. I'm like, that's a good thing. Because then they have to work together. When we have a two-party system, and you know what? That's why I'm a little ashamed of people like AOC and Ilhan Omar. Do what you have to do to get your policies through. Stop grifting on behalf of the establishment. And you know what? Marjorie Taylor Greene, kooky bird. Kook. But at least she stands for her principles and goes against McConnell and McCarthy. Like, I'd rather that. Like, AOC speaks this big game, but at the end of the day, she votes the way Nancy Pelosi votes.
And it's like the whole, bringing it back to, like, just how partisan of a country we are. You saw the bill to, like, proposal that passed through the House to make D.C. a state.
Yeah, and it won't pass through the Senate.
Right. This shouldn't be like, the whole conversation surrounding this is Democrats want to get Democrats want to get more seats into the Senate.
Yeah.
And Republicans don't want it. Why can't you just, like, exclusively look at do the people of Washington, D.C., not the politicians, but the people living there, want to be a state? And 2, do they meet the requirements for becoming a state? Those should be the only things looked at in whether or not Washington, D.C. becomes a state. But instead, It's this whole back and forth of, oh, you're only doing this because you want the seats. What? We want the seats? No, that's not why we're doing it. But, honestly, you know full well that they're going to, dude, everyone knows DC's going to be,
it is so painful
a Democratic,
watching,
would be Democratic state.
Yeah, it's so painful watching it, and someone confronted me because I said, okay, you know what? If you want to make DC a state, fine. You should make someplace like in New York, Long Island. Long Island has a very Republican community. Make Long Island a state and make DC a state.
The argument against Long Island is that you don't, like, draw the state lines based on policy, or not policy, based on, like, political alignment.
No,
political alignment
agree.
Will change. But
I agree. But that's what they're doing in DC.
Yeah, like,
that's
just
literally
ridiculous.
what they're doing.
And it's like,
first of all,
whether or not it should be a state, like, I don't know, honestly. I'm not super informed on whether or not the people of DC want to be a state, or if their economy's, like, large and stable
My
enough,
well,
or if
the
they
thing is,
need what... Like, I know they have enough people, but,
they
like,
say
that's
they
about it.
they say DC doesn't have representation. DC does have representation. DC has 2 shadow senators and 1 shadow representative. They have a government of their own. The whole point of DC's existence was so no state could control the government.
Right. And
that's why this is stupid.
The other interesting thing about this is if the issue was exclusively about making DC have representation, you could, I would imagine, that you could push, instead of state, like if this was the only issue, right, you could push to have them get representation, like proper representation where they have the ability to vote without statehood, right?
Yeah.
But
give
like
the shadow representatives more rights.
Right. Like, give them the ability to vote on anything that pertains to specifically DC. That, like, the thing is, if you give them the ability to vote on any matter, at that point, yeah, why not make it a state, right? But at the same time, Republicans aren't going to be okay with that. On the other hand, are Republicans really so entrenched in their party politics that they wouldn't let DC vote only on matters that have to do specifically with city management? Because, like, as much as they are entrenched in party politics, I feel like that would be a reasonable thing to have them vote on, right?
Yeah,
but they're not going that route.
I agree with that. But at the end of the day, it's also... it's how both parties are framing the argument, and this is just like the court packing thing. It's not going to pass, but it's just political grandstanding. Be like, oh look, we tried to do it, but they said no.
And yeah, just to be clear, like, our problem with this isn't whether or not DC should be a state. If DC should be a state, it should be a state. If it shouldn't, it shouldn't, right? But our problem is the way that the parties are framing this argument.
Yeah,
is
first
just
of all,
ridiculous.
It wasn't put on a ballot. It was created by the Washington, D.C. City Council, and then the mayor pushed it through to the Congress and the president. You didn't ask the people of D.C. if they wanted this. You just said, we're going to take the initiative and we're going to do it. And it's like, maybe they don't want to do it. Because you know why? D.C. doesn't have to suffer under certain taxes and everything that states do. That's why there is such a big population in DC, because they're protected from certain things. So this is pretty much... I'm not saying it kind of is, but I was like, I'm not gonna say this is a power grab. It kind of is though. But we're getting to this point, and you know what? We're seeing this with the Democrats, and I always say this: a tiger is most violent at the end. The Democrats right now have done so many things in these 4 months since President Biden's been in that they are horrified of 2022, because they're like, we didn't go through with any of our promises. We said $2,000 checks. We didn't give them $2,000. We said this didn't happen. Deportations are still happening. The border's a nightmare. All these things combined, and now they're sitting there like, oh, well, let's do this. And it's like, no, you're making yourself look worse. Just do things to help the communities. Stop with this crazy bickering and just do your jobs. God, I'm so sorry, but I keep going into freaking monologues. Jesus Christ.
No, that's fantastic. That's what we're here for.
But dude, it's enough, man. It's like, I'm not paying taxes, which thanks government for that, by the way. Love my tax return. What are they going to? They're going to these bickering fools who get chased out of every place they go to. I haven't seen a politician go to any public place that people weren't booing them to death. It really is exhausting, though. It's like, dude, we don't care what your political beliefs are. Just work with the other side and fix things. Like, I'm from a very Democrat area. I'm not a Democrat, but guess what? You represent me. You represent me, not only the Democrats. Do your job. Whew. I'm at beverage, so.
I think that's about all we have for domestic issues going on at the moment.
I just need to say, I saw Biden do a press conference yesterday, and it really made me sad because he's so old looking. And he's so
It really
bad.
doesn't help that he's not a good speaker.
And then he uses a teleprompter all the... I'm like, bro, I can see you reading it. I literally see his eyes go right to left. I'm like,
and that's the trouble is because he's not a good speaker, he has to use a teleprompter, right? But also, he's so his problems with public speaking are bad enough that you can not only can you tell that he's using a teleprompter, but when he still messes up despite using the teleprompter, it looks so much worse.
He literally not to bash on him.
I'm sure the man has coherent thoughts behind it, but coherent sentences are difficult.
I think, as someone who has suffered with family who has, and this isn't throwing punches at him or anything, and I've been saying, I met Biden back a few years ago when I worked in Washington, when he was vice president. He was polite to me. He was always very cordial. Even then, I was seeing what was coming. And I'm not saying politically, I have family who suffers from dementia and stuff like that, and I could see it, and I truly feel bad for him, because I feel it's really messed up, because honestly, I think he was the only person that was going to beat Trump. Everyone else did not.
That's the tragic, tragedy of the past election.
But, he also is so, he's rocking chair politician now.